Good morning, friends gathered in the sanctuary on Zoom and later on our YouTube channel. It's good to be together. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Franklin in the mountains of western North Carolina and northeast Georgia and the ancestral land of the Cherokee. We are a lay-led congregation of progressive minds and caring connections. All are welcome as we worship that which gives us meaning and joy. My name is Robbie Greenberg, and I am pleased to be your service leader today. To our visitors, we extend a warm welcome. And if you're here for the first time or returning after a while, if you would like to introduce yourself, I believe we have a microphone that we could bring to you. Is there anyone who would like to introduce themselves to us? Okay. Anyone on Zoom?
Let me take a look into the Zoom world and see if we have anyone waiting for attention. I don't see anyone that we don't know.
Okay. Well, what we do as a community, since we have people at home watching us on Zoom, is if we look to that camera over the door, we can wave good morning to them, and they can wave good morning back to us. For we are the roomies, and they are the Zoomies.
And some of us are both.
And that's true. On our church-related announcements, if you have a church-related announcement and would like to share it, you can come up to our microphone. I have several, and if Dawn, if you would like to come up first, and then I'll tell you mine.
Now that the holiday season is kind of past us, I was told I have to. Anyway, now that the holiday season is past us and things have settled down a little bit, we're going to start up our third Wednesday morning gatherings. This third Wednesday, the 17th of January, 9:30 we'll be here. And if you have something you want to bring to share, we're just gathering for breakfast. See you then.
This is sort of church-related, so I'm new here, and two of the things I love to do is hike and build community with people. And when I spoke with someone about this, either Mary or Robbie, they suggested the Nantahala Hiking Club, which I've looked into that, and I'm happy to be like a liaison between them and us, announcing hikes that are coming up. But I'm also, if you want to grab me during the potluck and let me know if you're interested in that, I would love to just start building community with you guys out hiking. Oh, sorry, Angelina Carpenter.
Thank you, Angelina, and thank you, Dawn. First of all, I'd like to thank our Sunday service team, which includes, we have Becky and Edgar and Ben and Warren and Jude and Jill. Did I miss anybody? No, and I also want to thank Angie for being our greeter today. Unfortunately, fortunately, Angie's also a grandmother and has babysitting duties in Georgia, so she welcomed you, and then she's off to go see her grandchild. So We'll thank Angie when we see her next. Hospitality, we have Lotus and Nate, and they are with us and will be with us. Masks are now optional for all of our gatherings, and for the common good, we highly recommend all of your vaccinations and encourage social distancing. Masks and sanitizers are available, and from what I hear, our numbers are up in Franklin, so keep that in mind. And if you don't feel well, and please mask, join us on Zoom, or stay home and rest. We have coloring kits available. If you want to do something with your fingers while your mind is focused on what we're talking about, they're in the back, and it's kind of fun to use them. So our winter book read begins in January. For those of you who saw David Lamott here, he wrote a book called You Are Changing the World, Whether You Like It or Not, and that will be our book read. It starts on Sunday, January 21st at 1 p.m. following coffee hour, and it will also be hybrid so that those at home would like to join it on Zoom. It's going to run for at least 3 weeks. The fourth week, the group needs to decide if they want to meet again. And please let Don Erickson know if you would like to participate in the book read. Also in January, our new Intro to UU course begins. And this is for just about anybody that wants to know a little bit about a Unitarian Universalist and why we're here and what we're doing. So our Intro to UU will only be on Zoom. It starts Wednesday, January 10th. It's an hour and a half, and I think we're going to run for 5 or 6 weeks. Is that right? 5 or 6 weeks. So because I have no memory, even if you've told me that you would be joining us at the new UU meetings, new year, new calendar, new brain, I need to start over, so please let me know again. Today is our monthly potluck following the service. And if you had joined us today and did not bring something to share, we always have plenty because we have a very generous congregation. Yes?
The link for that Zoom for UU 101 is?
An hour and a half. UU 101 is an hour and a half.
The Zoom link.
Oh, the link is the same link as you would get on to come to the worship services. We have one link for everything. And it's in the UU View. Is there anyone here who doesn't get the UU View and we need to put you on the list? Okay, so you know where to get the link to come to the classes. We hope that you'll come to all the classes because each week is a different topic, but if you only can make 1 or 2, that's fine, they're self-contained. Our first one will be about who are some UUs, what our history is, and I think that's a good place to start. So today is our potluck, and please join us. Our guest speaker today, has brought a book to look at and a couple magazines that are quite interesting, so she'll be happy to share those. And also at 2:30 today, the Listening Room Concerts will present Charlie Simmons. And the suggested donation is $20, but no one will be turned away. So if you would like to stay for some music after the potluck, we would love to have you join us. Whew, lots of announcements. Do we have any announcements on Zoom?
I'm looking in the Zoom world, I don't see anyone. Don't see anyone.
Okay, so also you can look in the UU View. Mary keeps that up to date with all of the current happenings. So if you forgot something or you need a phone number or a date, it's in the UU View. Our fellowship is a light for liberal religion in the mountains that values diversity and the richness it brings to our community. Our celebration of diversity is reflected in the variety of our Sunday services, and we hope that today's service will enrich your journey. If Judith will come up and light the chalice for me, I will read our chalice lighting. Without her tiara. She has a very lovely tiara. If you could light it first, and then I'll read the words. Thank you. Our chalice lighting is from Paul Spreckler. We light this chalice to honor the memory of those who have come before us. kindling flames of wisdom in dark times, willing to challenge the orthodoxy even at great personal risk, giving us a legacy of freedom and a love of truth, a legacy that warms our hearts and lights our path. Our opening words are from Harriet Tubman, and then we will have our opening song. Our opening words are short, but right on target. Slavery is the next thing to hell. I very carefully brought our bowl up here to sound the bowl at the opening of the service and immediately forgot to do it. So it's an important part of our service, so I'm going to do that now. We have all heard of the Underground Railroad, which ran from 1810 to 1850. But there was another railroad story happening around that time that did not get as much recognition. In 1832, there was a wagon train that traveled from mid-state North Carolina to Macon County that offered real freedom to slaves who had already been freed. You see, a slave that has been freed could be dragged back into slavery if he were not a landowner. Abolitionist William Morrison, upon the death of his father, led that amazing trip into the mountains, followed by several wagons. Here today to tell you about that trip is the 2023 Matriarch of Macon County, Sue Waldroop. But she is much more than the great-granddaughter of a hero. She has lived a pretty heroic life herself. While working and raising a family, Sue Waldroop earned a degree in social work from Western Carolina University, graduating summa cum laude in 1979. She worked for the Macon County Department of Social Services from 65 to 83. She went to work for the North Carolina Services for the Blind, covering the 5 western counties. She had some clients who lived on the Cherokee Reservation who only spoke their native language, so she learned to speak some Cherokee. Sue retired in 1994 but remained active, serving several terms on the Macon County Planning Board as chairman on the Macon County Board of Education and on the Macon County Democratic Party Executive Committee. She was a member of the Folk Heritage Association of Macon, and even after she rotated off the board, she continued to volunteer at the annual Franklin Area Folk Festival. While her children were growing up, she served as a Brownie Scout leader and a 4-H leader. She teamed up with Joanne Corbin to organize the Pink Ladies volunteer group at the hospital. She also served as president of Friends of the Library during construction of the new library on Seiler Road, and she still volunteers for Friends of the Library today. The Sue Waldroop that I have come to know was taught to quilt by her grandmother when she was 6. She has a rocking chair that her grandfather sat in to read to her from when she was 3 until she could read herself at 6. She still has a stool converted from a dynamite box that she sat on while her grandmother told her stories about the Civil War, or in capital letters, the war. She is a generous, caring friend who is grateful but deserving of all that comes her way. She's a storyteller with stories that could fill books and has many to tell you today. She's probably mad at me for taking too long to introduce her, so please welcome Sue Waldroop.
If I hadn't ridden over here with her, I'm not sure I know who she's talking about. Just for curiosity's sake, how many of you are from Macon County? So I'm the odd man out this morning. I have always been interested in history and was fortunate enough to grow up in the household of my grandmother and grandfather, my father's family. And I was the only little one there, and I gained a lot and I lost a lot by being the only little one. But I did spend a lot of time with older people. I can remember both my grandfathers and even my great-grandfather from long ago. But to begin with, the person that I'm going to talk about today, his name was William Morrison, and as far as we know, he had no middle name. But oddly enough, his son was William Morrison. Now, his father's name was John, but his grandfather was William Morrison. So I've had a time keeping them in the right century. But this William Morrison, evidently, he was an only son. And he inherited land down in the central part of North Carolina. Burke County is where he lived last. He married a girl from Mecklenburg County whose name was Cynthia Black. And Cynthia Black already had 2 uncles living in what became Macon County. It was still part of Waynesville area. Buncombe County was chopped off in pieces to make these western counties. But anyway, to go back to the lineage, he brought a wagon train from Burke County in 1832. And in that wagon train was his wife and 3 sons. She was driving a surrey. I don't know if you know what a surrey is, but it's a carriage, horse-drawn carriage with 2 seats. And she had 3 little boys, and the black woman who had been with her from the time she was a child and would not leave her even though she was freed now. But my great-great-grandfather, much against the popular opinion of his time, did not believe in slavery. He was highly radical for his time of life. He was born in 1794 and was married to Cynthia Black, and she was born in 1803. So it's been a long time, but I have done a lot of research, and I brought today some pictures of him and other family too, and also a book put out by Macon County back some 28, 30 years ago, and it's the Macon County Heritage Book, and I don't know if you've ever seen it, but mine is here, and they do still have copies of it at the museum in town if anybody's interested in it. But my great-great-grandfather evidently was a pretty hot-natured somebody because he stayed that way the rest of his life. But he brought 10 families of black people with him. And they were, each of them had a wagon. And when they got here, he started buying up land. I verified in the very first deed book of Macon County that he took up, they used to call it, 1,400 acres of Macon County, most of which he gave away. And he gave it to these black people who came with him. He gave enough land to have a cabin or even a little house, to have a barn, to have a garden, and to have a pasture. And the 1,400 acres is still right there in the deed book. It's not for public consumption anymore. They've put it in a little place to itself, but it can be looked at if anybody would like to go look up where he owned the land. But where he owned it was on Lakey Creek. Now, about 25, 28 years ago, we did a book, Macon County Heritage, and I've got a copy of it here, but there's a lot of stories in there about people, and I have 5 or 6 in there myself about relatives who lived here. But until you read some of those, you won't quite understand what this county has been like. But as I said, I'm fifth generation Macon County. And I've been, if you listen to what Robbie said a while ago, you might think I was somebody on a splinter, but nevertheless, I appreciate all her kind words. But I have done a lot, but my family background has been a source of great pride to me, because he not only believed that it was wrong for one man to own another, he did something about it. And I think the main reason that he came here and made that horrible trip in 1832 was because there were threats, and probably more than just threats, down in Burke County, because he was way, way ahead of his time. He brought with him, as I said, his wife, and they had 3 little boys. Little John, who was already 5, little William, who was 3 and almost a half, and then the baby was Andrew, and he was barely a year old. Those little 3 children were in that surrey, and you can imagine there was only one road from the mid part of North Carolina into the mountains, and it was just a towpath at one time. But anyway, my great-great-grandmother drove that surrey with 2 horses. And can you imagine what her hands might have been like by the time she got here? But they lived in, built a house, and pictures of it are here for you to look at. And it's still being occupied. It's the oldest house in Macon County today. And it was redone. The land trust for the Little Tennessee bought the place. I don't know how many, it must be 25 years ago now, but anyway, they redid it and they sold it, and a requirement of the purchase was that the people would agree that they would keep it as much like what it was when they restored it as they could possibly do. And I have some pictures here of what the people look like, and I've talked with the lady of the house recently, and they still enjoying where they are. And my dad told me that he could remember playing in the old house, and that it upstairs it was built out of chestnut logs, that there were loopholes in between the logs because the Indians had still not been, as they said in those days, taken off. The Trail of Tears had not yet happened. But it must have been a really difficult time and place to live. And the only help that my great-great-grandmother had was this woman who had been with her from childhood, who refused to leave even though she was freed. And she spent her time here. And one of the high points of my getting into this, to begin with, this picture that you have seen up here of my great-great-grandfather, we worked on a Macon County heritage book back in those days, and we met at the courthouse, and we worked several nights on it, and different people wrote stories for it. And I was sitting one night with a black woman and I had known her and her family all my life, and every time we ever needed anything done, killing hogs or whatever, somebody from that family was there. And her name was Ruthie Lee. And I said to her, Ruthie Lee, I want to know one thing. Why has your family always been there for mine? And she said, honey, do you not know? I said, no, I really don't know. I just know that every chore we've ever had, from my grandfather on down, we had somebody from the Burston family that would come to see about doing it, killing hogs or whatever we did. And she said, well, your great-great-granddaddy brought us up out of there after he freed us, because he knowed if he left us down there, we'd get tucked back in slavery. And I'm sure that was true, and one of the reasons why he came here when he did and built his house where he did. But anyhow, there's still 133 acres of it, and the people who live in it had to sign an agreement that they would maintain it the way it is. So it's kind of nice to know that somebody appreciated it after all those years. But that's almost 200 years ago. Now, I've had other ancestors that I have traced, and I've had a relative, cousin, an uncle, or whatever, in every war the United States has fought in except the War of 1812, and I've never found anybody in that war. But my mother's family goes back as far as the French and Indian War. And her family was involved with Daniel Boone and that bunch in Boonesboro. And several of them moved here from there. And if you were a Callaway, which my mother was, or any of other 3-4 names, then people knew that that's where you came from. And Daniel Boone was in the very upper corner of North Carolina, in and out and in and out for a long time too. But my great-great-grandfather is a figure of great pride to me. I think he was so far ahead of his time, because you think almost 200 years ago, and he thought that slavery was morally wrong, and he did what he could to alleviate it. But each of those people, and I have met descendants of several of those folks that came, besides the Burstons that I mentioned. And they all were taught to revere my great-great-grandfather. Now, I never knew him because he died right at the end of the Civil War in 1866. And so I didn't get to know him. But still, I know him in a lot of ways, I think. And I've been by that place a number of times. I never have gone in because I don't know the people, and like mountain folks, you don't intrude on people you don't know and haven't been invited. But it's still a great pleasure to me to know that he was there and that he cared that much about people. There's a lot of stories that are about younger ancestors that I have. My great-grandfather, oddly enough, even though his father was such a very strong person against slavery, he fought in the Civil War. He was a lieutenant of cavalry, and he fought in the Battle of Lookout Mountain and lost his horse. They shot his horse out from under him. And he brought his little remnant of troops back from there to here right during that end of that battle. And they stayed for the rest of that winter, and they went on down and joined P.G.T. Beauregard. Now, why my great-grandfather fought for the Confederacy, I don't know, but he evidently had it worked out in his own mind. But my grandmother was the only child who lived of his first union, and when he came home from the Battle of Lookout Mountain, his wife and his brand new baby son had died that day. The little boy had been born, and they were both gone. So they stayed the rest of the winter here, and they joined, I'm sure you've heard of, P.G.T. Beauregard down in Georgia, and fought on to the end of the war. But I think that Macon County has been blessed with the people that have been here. Of course, a lot of our young folks went off to work in the mills downstate, and some of them stayed, and some few of them managed to come back home. But anybody who would read some of the stories in this book, they're back from as far back as people could remember and as far back as they heard stories. But it's been quite a time to get to be Macon County as we are today. And if you have questions you'd like to ask, I'd be glad to answer them if I could. Okay?
Hang on a second till we get you a microphone so the people on Zoom can hear you. Or if you want to go up front.
Yeah, either one. I'll take out Becky, it's closer. that good? All right. Yeah. So, first of all, thank you. Very interesting. I'm very new here, but this is a topic I'm very interested in. One of the things you mentioned about the house was that there were loopholes in it.
Loopholes, yes. You can see in this magazine that I have brought, there are pictures showing the house when it was being redone, and you can see the chestnut logs. They're about this thick. Wow. That made the house to begin with, and then they put whatever covering that they had over it, just planks, mostly weatherboarding, I guess. But you can see how those logs were put together, and they're still right there, just as solid as they can be. And the timber was cut there on the place, chestnut logs. That's before the chestnut got wormy and all of it died. So.
Well, I don't know what a loophole is in a log cabin.
Oh, a loophole, okay, you put two logs together and you chink them in the middle with mud or whatever you have.
Gotcha.
But you leave a little hole that will accommodate the barrel of a rifle from the inside of the house, and it's called a loophole.
Oh.
Now, my dad remembered playing in that old house, and of course they would shoot whatever they were shooting out of loopholes. My daddy was born in 1896 and died in 1967.
Isn't that interesting in how we use that word now, loophole?
Loopholes.
You know, how we use it now linguistically to speak about how people get around things. I'm a lover of language, so.
Well, I guess that was if you had a loophole to get around being killed.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And so at that time, apparently, we were still fighting the Native Americans.
It was
too.
long before the Trail of Tears happened that they came.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, the Trail of Tears, you know, I don't know how much you know about it.
A lot.
But the Indians were herded together and driven on foot from here to, well, a lot of them camped in Murphy for several months and then went on. But it was quite a trip.
It was the Holocaust of the South.
And there was, I have a daughter who's very musical, and this I didn't intend to tell, but I'm going to anyway. She wrote a song about Solly, and Solly was an Indian who lived at the time of the Trail of Tears. And Solly had 3 sons, and he had a wife, and on the trail, he had brought the 3 boys, and he and his wife were traveling with the boys in the group on the way. And one of the soldiers, I don't know for what reason, but one of the soldiers was not as patient as he should have been, and Solly's wife was not as well as she would have hoped. And she was lagging behind, and of course Solly and the boys were trying to walk with her. And one of the soldiers gave her a big shove, and she fell. And Solly, who had not wanted to go in the first place, had a knife concealed on his person. And my daughter wrote the song about it. It said, "In Solly's hand was a shining blade, and the soldier paid with his life." And he did. Well, Solly and the boys, they ran into the woods and hid, and they couldn't find him. And they called him Governor, General Winfield Scott, was searching for him day and night through the mountains. Couldn't get him. He finally sent out word, to Solly, "If you'll come down and give yourself up, I will let the rest of the people stay in the mountains." So the last of her song is, and Solly and the boys, they came down and died before the firing squad. But still his soul comes around today, walking in the rolling fog. Walking in the rolling fog. So Solly was the sort of savior of his people to a certain extent.
That gave me goosebumps.
And that's a true story.
It's beautiful. Thank you. I didn't either. Yeah. Another question I had was, I'm just curious about your great-great-grandfather and his moral code to take his privilege as a white person and buy land for people he had no blood kin to, whatever. He just saw himself as a part of humanity. And I'm curious if he had any sort of spiritual or religious leading that led him to that.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the last sentence.
I'm just curious if he had a church that he belonged to that maybe.
Well, of course, there wasn't a church back then.
Right.
But when he went to church, he went to Cowee Baptist Church.
Okay.
Which is another thing that I should tell you about. He left instructions that when he died, he would not be buried in the Cowee churchyard. He'd be buried on the hill where his people were buried. Because the black folks were buried up on the hill above the Cowee church. Now, I know which hill he's buried on, but I don't know which field rock is at his grave. But he didn't have a grave. In 1866, there may not have been money left for a stone. I don't know, because that was the year after the war ended. And my grandmother was born the first year of the Civil War. And like I say, she spent many hours telling me stories about things that happened during the war. Yeah. And the war was always in capital letters, and that was the Civil War. She lived through that one, and she lived through the Spanish-American War, World War I, and World War II. So she was a pretty tough little old lady. Came about to my shoulders, by the way.
I've got one last question, and then I'll give up the mic. You mentioned the 1,400 acres by
Yes.
Lakey Creek. I am very new here. I've just been living here about 6 weeks now. Is Lakey Creek still an area in town?
Yes, the Lakey Creek is still there, and it's still called Lakey Creek. But the area that he took up was scattered all over what is now Cowee and those areas down there.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you. Thank you.
So, but he would not be buried in the Cowee Cemetery. Thank you very much. If it wasn't good enough for his people there, it wasn't good for him. Okay, is anybody else?
My name is Lara Jackson. Yeah, it's on. I too am not from here myself, but all my family relatives are. I was wondering if you were familiar with the Jones who lived on Jones Creek, or the Sanders who lived on Sanders Knob.
I don't know anything about Sanders Knob, but I have a great-grandmother who was a Sanders. So probably am I related to them if they are anywhere from here. So.
Well, they were here, and my grandmother was a Jones, and she lived on Jones Creek, and she married a man called Monroe Sanders, who lived up on Sanders Knob.
Okay, Monroe Sanders is a family name in the Sanders that I'm related to. I didn't know him, but
Well, he was killed.
I recognize the name as being in the family
He was killed in 1914 in the and something concerning the implementing of the fence laws here in this county. It was a very big thing when they implemented the fence laws.
Yeah.
And he was for the fence laws, and some people were not. And he got in whatever. Anyway, he was killed. And I now live in the cabin that was built by the man he got in the
Well,
fight
that's good.
with.
You and I'll have to sit down and talk.
Yeah. Okay.
We probably chase up kinfolks. If we call
Okay.
it.
All right. Thank you.
So, okay. Do I have another question? Don't see anybody. Thank you for having me.
Bonnie has a question on Zoom. Bonnie on Zoom has a question.
Okay. Bonnie?
Hi, Sue. Can you hear? Can anybody hear me? Oh, okay. I have a question. What does your family tell you the reason why the Civil War was fought? I'm curious.
Reasons for the Civil War. Each person who fought or refused to fight, I guess, would have picked a reason. But I can't tell you a reason. I've heard any number of them, and I suppose it's take your choice. There was a lot of causes for it. And I think really and truly, probably more than one cause. Part of it was the slavery. Part of it was other rights that the states had claimed that was being taken from them. Part of it was just mass hysteria, too. So I don't know. You'd take a smarter person than me to tell you what was the reason for the Civil War or any other war.
Well, I thank you for painting that accurate picture. Thank you.
Thank you.
That was enlightening. The dedication of our gifts. The Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Franklin appreciates all gifts of time, talent, and treasure. If you choose to gift treasure, please know that financial donations are welcome in this fellowship at the sanctuary entry by mail or electronically. Now please join me in saying, gifts given in love and hope, continuous cycle of love and hope. May it be so. As we prepare for joys and concerns, know that they will be edited out before posting online. A pebble cast into a pond causes ripples that spread in all directions. The sharing of joys, sorrows, and milestones is one way that we keep the ritual and practice of holding one another in community. We speak what is in our hearts because there's power in standing together in these moments. If you would like, you are welcome to share a special joy or concern, and I will drop a pebble in the water. We will begin with those on Zoom, acknowledged by our host, followed by those in the sanctuary. Do we have any joys or concerns on Zoom? We drop a final pebble for the joys and sorrows that haven't been spoken, but which remain in the silent sanctuaries of our hearts. These joys and griefs, spoken and unspoken, weave us together in the fabric of this community. If we could take a moment of silence to think about. Our closing words are from Leah Derland Jones. For those who came before us, we offer gratitude and thanks. May their memories be a blessing. May we feel surrounded by their love as we go forth from this time and place. Let us be inspired by their courage. their wisdom, and their dreams. Let us honor them by doing the work of living boldly, loving mightily, and creating heaven on earth. And now our closing song is "O Freedom." Judith, would you join me on stage, please? Okay, you can extinguish it first and then I'll speak. Thank you. We extinguish this chalice in the appreciation of our ancestors. May we carry the flame in their names as we walk our own journey, following not in their footsteps, but our own path as they would have walked it. Now we will join together in spirit as we recite our closing covenant. Love is the spirit of this fellowship, and community is its goal. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. May it be so. Thank you for joining us today. Next Sunday, on Martin Luther King Jr. Day, we will celebrate Coretta Scott King. I hope you can join us. So as we end our service, we're going to take a moment for the Zoomies and the Roomies to wave goodbye. There they are over the door. Everyone is invited to unmute, so to speak, those in Zoom with each other and those in the sanctuary together for our potluck in Celebration Hall. Our service is ended. Thank you.